QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021, options for entering items, customers, and vendors. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file. We have the home page open. We also have the open windows open, which you could find in the drop-down up top in the view drop-down and open windows list. That'll give us a list of our open items, the only thing open at this time being the home page. So we're thinking about now how we can import information with regards to customers, vendors, and other items, including inventory items and service items that we will be using to populate forms such as invoices and sales receipts. Now, if you're starting from scratch and you haven't entered anything else and this is a brand new business, you may not have any vendors or customers and you can just add them as you go, and we'll just add those items as we go. If you are a continuing business, then it's possible that you might already have a list of customers from some other software or some other format that you've been working your accounting with, and you might want to import multiple customers and vendors and items, things you sell, at one point in time. So we'll discuss how to make that a little bit faster. Or if this is a new business, it might be easier for you to list your customers and your vendors, say, in Excel, and then import them as opposed to entering them into QuickBooks one at a time. So those are some of your options that you can have. Now, the other thing we want to do is if you're a continuing business, meaning you have some other accounting system that you had before this, you want to start QuickBooks at this point in time, you don't want to transfer the data file and enter the entire data file. You'd like to basically start at this point, and that's what we're going to practice here. We're going to say, we want to take the financial statements as of the last accounting system, which will be these. We want to enter it into the current system as of this point in time going forward. We're going to say going forward in January 1st, 2021. So it's going to be January 1st, 2021 will be our cutoff period or our starting period that we will be entering the data and then moving forward from that point. If you can do this with a cutoff period for the entire year, if you're a calendar year business, that's the best way to do it, because then you don't have an accounting system or two different systems you need to be looking at when you're going to prepare your information for taxes and whatnot. So whatever, if you're starting a new accounting system, even if you started in the middle of the year, you might want to enter data all the way back through January and then basically say everything prior to that point in time was in the prior accounting system. If we do that, then I need to enter the beginning balances in basically our balance sheet accounts to the new system. We're not going to have any income statement accounts. We're just going to start at the balance sheet accounts. I'm going to enter that data as of the end of the last time period, which is the end of December, or December 31st, 2020, so that that beginning balance information on the balance sheet will be there so that we can move forward in the current time period, which will begin in January. So this beginning balance is another item that we're going to have to basically be dealing with. We could enter this information with simply a journal entry, but it doesn't work perfectly because we're going to have more supporting information, subsidiary kind of ledger accounts that are going to help us with that. Therefore, we're going to use beginning balances to basically help us to enter this in. So two things that we want to achieve here as we start to think about importing data. One is we want to import data such as customers. If we had a customer list, we have a small customer list of 3 customers. We want to enter those customers and any kind of contact information as fast and easily as possible. If we have a long list, it might be easier for us to take that Excel sheet, if we can get one, and then upload it. Same with the vendors, possibly the same with employees. And then 2, we want to, as we do that, pick up the related accounts that are needing to be picked up. For example, if we enter this beginning balance, if these are our beginning balances we need to enter, the checking account, we'll have to deal with the checking account a little bit later. We'll talk about that because there's bank reconciliation issues. We will deal with that account when we enter the beginning balance there. The receivables, note the receivables represent customers owing us money. So if we're starting the QuickBooks system and we already have people owing us money, we cannot just put one number in the receivables, but also need to be representing which customers owe us money. So in other words, we need to support this number with the customers. So we need a customer list, not just giving us the customer information that we want to import, contact information, customer name, mailing address, and whatnot, but also the balance that they owe us at that point in time so that we can enter the beginning balance so that QuickBooks can then have the subsidiary ledger, the backup information to the receivable account to help us to enter this to beginning balance information. Back to the trial balance, if we take a look at the inventory, Same kind of thing with the inventory. The inventory is going to be made up of the things that we sell, which we're going to call items. So these are going to be item lists when we talk about it in as we import it. So the items are the things that we sell. Those are our inventory items. And then we'll have service items. So when we import the items, the things that we sell, we're going to have a list of items that we sell that are going to help us to populate the invoice and the sales receipt. But we also need to know what the cost of those items are, so that if we are tracking inventory, as we will in this practice problem, we not only have the items that will be used to populate the invoice, but we're tracking the cost of those items as well. Once again, we need the subsidiary ledger. So as we upload the item list, we need to upload the item list and the beginning balances so that we can get this beginning balance properly formatted on the balance sheet, and then move forward from that point. Then we have the accumulated depreciation and the furniture and the fixture, and furniture and fixture, or depreciable assets. We could have a similar situation here, but this is often more straightforward kind of situation. Depends if you're tracking the furniture and fixture in the QuickBooks software, or if you're going to use some other external software, possibly tax software, to track the details of the furniture and fixture. And then we have the accounts payable, similar to the accounts receivable, but this represents people that we owe money to. So these are payables. Therefore, the support of the payable will be the vendors. So once again, we cannot just put the $15,000 on a payable on the books, because we also need to tie that payable to who we owe the money to, so that QuickBooks can then put together a subsidiary ledger to who we owe the money to. So when we think about the people we owe to, the vendors, the people we pay, like the telephone company, utilities, and whatnot, everybody that we pay money to, it could be a very extensive list. Now, the vendors, we often don't need as much detail on the vendors, because all we want is the name and our ability to be able to pay them oftentimes, as opposed to the customers up here represented by the accounts receivable, where we want all the customer information we can get, including their contact information, phone number, possibly any details, about them that we can, talk about with them or whatever, depending on, in a conversation type of format, would be more necessary, because we want to be sending them our newsletters and all that kind of stuff. Vendors, we might not have as much detail, so we might be able to add the vendors basically as we go a little bit more easily, and just add the names as we go for common vendors. But our major vendors that we buy like inventory from, once again, we want to build a good relationship and make sure we have all the information in our system related to them. We can import that information, and we also need to be importing at that time the beginning balance. Which vendors do we owe money to? Credit card, kind of a similar situation, but and we'll have to deal with it's a different kind of thing. We got the credit card, you'll have to deal with the beginning balance of the credit card, how much is owed. And then we have a loan payable with the loan, so more of a straightforward kind of situation if you have a payable on the loan. And then equity. So we're concentrating here on the receivables and the customers related to them, the payables and the vendors related to them, and then the inventory and the items related to them. So the beginning balance, as well as entering that data. So I'm going to minimize this. So if we think about this in terms of QuickBooks, we have the vendor section and we have the customer section. And so the vendors are who we pay money to. Customers are people that pay, are going to pay us money. You can go into the vendor detail by going to the vendor dropdown and the vendor center here, or you can go to the home tab and just click the vendors up top, and that will take you to your vendor section. Now your vendors will be listed on this side. You can make it a little bit larger so you can see them. The detail will be on the right hand side. To add vendors, you could select this dropdown up top and add a new vendor, adding them one at a time. Or you can add multiple vendors. So if you have multiple vendors, then you might be adding them in this format, adding multiple vendors at one point in time. So if you select that, you're going to get a drop-down screen such as this, and it'll have your basically your data input screen here, where we're on the vendors, and then you can populate your vendors. Now we'll talk more about how to do this in a future presentation. We'll get into actually entering these items. Even if you have multiple vendors, you can, if you just set them up nicely here, you can do the data input pretty quickly, or you can picking this data up from an Excel worksheet. And so we'll take a look at this more in the future, but you can customize the columns here. So the columns that you don't need, there's going to be a whole lot of columns available to you. So we can go to the customize columns, and then you can basically go to your information, and these are customers, but if they were vendors, you could copy the information here and then paste it into QuickBooks, as long as you have then the correct columns set up. So, and we're going to have to set up the columns in order to do that customization process. So that's going to be on the vendor side of things. I'm going to close this back out. I'm going to close this back out. The same thing will be due for the customers. So the customers are people that owe us money. So if we were to enter in the customers or go to the customer section in a similar way, we got a very similar layout on the customer side of things. We've got the name and then the detail for the customers on the right here. No customers yet in place. If we wanted to add customers, we could select the drop down. We can add new customers basically here, one at a time, or we can add multiple customers. If you go to the add multiple customers here and basically you want to import customers, we'll do it. You could do it from Excel, but we'll basically copy and paste it. We could do the same thing. So now we're in the customer, same window here, but now we're in the customer section. We could customize this, adjusting the columns to what we need. And then if we have an Excel worksheet that we can basically pick up in the same format and copy and paste over, that's the way we could basically import it. That I think is going to be the easiest process to do. So I'm going to then close this back out. Notice as we do that, one of the fields we'll need to do is enter the balance that they owe us. That's going to be the beginning balance. And that beginning balance then is what's going to be used to populate the trial balance. So QuickBooks will then populate the trial balance automatically as we go. You might be thinking, if you work in accounting, you might say, well, how is that going to be in balance if you just put in $20,500 into the receivable? How does that work? I mean, what's the other side going to go to? Well, QuickBooks will just put it into opening balance equity on the other side, which seems kind of random, but if you enter every beginning balance up top and QuickBooks puts every other side to opening balance, then it will actually work. So instead of doing one journal entry, we will just enter all the beginning balances. QuickBooks will force it to balance, and then we'll adjust this opening balance account at the end of the day. So I'm going to close this back out, and then we also have the items that we would need to be entering. Now, these would be the inventory items. So the items are what we often call lists in QuickBooks. So I'm going to go to the lists drop down, and I want to go to the items lists. I'll open up this window again. I close this window. So we have the items, and we can add new items. So we've got add an item or edit an item or add one new item, or we can add, edit multiple items. Once again, from this window, this is where we're going to enter our inventory and our services that we're going to do. So if I choose the drop down up top and I choose, say, inventory parts, let's say, inventory parts, then we're going to have our data entry. And once again, we can pick this up from possibly an Excel worksheet that has a list of all the things that we do, service items and inventory items. We can basically format this so that we can copy and paste it in here as quickly as possible. The beginning balances that will result in this data input section will then help us to populate the inventory section of our beginning balance on the balance sheet. So if I minimize this out, so that's what we're going to need there. Again, we're in the same kind of drop down, customers, vendors. Now we're in inventory items. Closing this back out, I'm going to then go to the home tab. Once we enter the inventory items, notice it also will help us to populate when we make an invoice and when we make a sales receipt. So if I was, for example, to make an invoice, we want to make this as easy as possible in that we would like the item here to be dropped down. This is where our inventory items will be once we populate it. You can make invoices by just basically giving a description and giving an amount over here, but that's very tedious. If you're making a lot of invoices or even very few invoices, it'll be difficult to do. What you want to do is standardize the invoice so that anybody could enter the invoice, and to do that, you set up the items. So we'll set up the items so that you can select the item automatically. It will then populate the rate that has been set automatically. The more rates that you can set to be automatic, the easier your billing process will be. Especially, and you might want to move away from an hourly billing to something like a standard set billing process, because billing can take up a lot of time and anxiety to think about, the billing all the time. If you can kind of standardize that process and say, hey, this is what I charge by, this is, and just have a set fee for the service based on different brackets, even if it's a service item, it would be easier than to set up the billing. And then this will populate basically in and of itself on its own. So we want to be able to set that up when we enter the inventory items. So that's what we'll start to go in as next time. We're going to go into some of these items basically entering two things. Once again, we want to enter the beginning balance as we enter these items, and we also want to be entering the related sub-account balances and the vendors and customers, including accounts receivable, meaning the customers related to them, so that we have the contact information, accounts payable, the vendors related to them, so that we have that data in the system and can move forward. And with regards to inventory, we want to have the balance and the inventory items as well as the service items input to make the processing or creation of our invoices and sales receipts as easy as possible. We want someone that doesn't know anything about the process of putting this together, someone that doesn't know anything about QuickBooks or accounting, to simply be able to do the data input for the create sales receipt and the invoice. And if we set up the system properly, that is doable.